Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Ressa. Today we're going to have an interesting conversation with Israel's ambassador, Ben Matityau. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
What people may not know in the Philippines is the deep ties that we have going back during World War II, during the Holocaust, and the role that the Philippines played to bring the victims of the Holocaust through, right?
Actually, it's a fascinating story. And you're right, most Filipinos don't know that, and even Israelis don't know that. And that reflects strongly on what is Philippines, who are the Filipinos.
Yes.
And unfortunately, people don't connect the dots. Because the story begins prior to World War II with the first elected president of the Philippines, Manuel Quezon.
Yes.
He actually witnessed firsthand the horrors of Nazism, or the rise of Nazism in Germany. He was in Germany for a visit. And he came back, and he was approached by a number of the heads of the Jewish community in Manila. And they asked for his help and his support to practically, how to call it, either to bring or to open the gates of Philippines to Jewish refugees.
Yes.
At that time, it's before the war, and
Yes.
nobody knows that there will be a war or a Holocaust. And he agreed.
Yes.
He agreed out of his moral conviction.
And that's about 1,200 to 1,500 Jewish refugees, right?
But I say this story is beyond the story of the Philippines, because before World War II, and World War II is the darkest chapter in human history,
Yeah.
there you have the biggest moral collapse of those who call themselves enlightened nations. That was a total darkness and collapse.
Yes.
And here you have the little Philippines without any connection to the Jewish people, without any obligation to the Jewish people, because they are not Filipino citizens.
Yes.
Out of pure moral conviction, having one of its biggest moral victories, because in the context of time, to be humanitarian was impossible. No one wanted to be humanitarian,
Yes.
neither in Europe nor elsewhere. Everybody was closing the doors.
Yes.
That's the beauty of the story. It's really about the Philippines and a decision that earned it a great moral victory and a great thank you, Philippines, from the Jewish people. So I think that this part of the contrast between moral victory and moral collapse is missing in our understanding the story.
Interesting.
And that is the true story, where, Philippines opened the doors and opened the hearts. And the Jewish people who came here felt immediately at home.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them stayed in Philippines.
And they lived in Marikina, the settlers,
stayed
right?
after the war.
After the war
And
yeah.
everything. And a fascinating story that among the families that have an impact of that time and this story, you also have the family of the president.
Yes.
Elizabeth Zimmerman Duterte was a granddaughter. She's a granddaughter of one of those Jewish refugees.
Really? Oh, I didn't know that. And that's.
And the president said it out loud, so I can say it.
Yes.
So that's one of the fascinating stories. It's of course, it's Elizabeth. It has nothing to do with religion, because
Yes.
Elizabeth is a devout Catholic, but
Yes.
it's not about that. It's really about the idea that here is the Philippines saving a life from certain deaths in the Holocaust that came after, and here is a family born.
And had an impact on national.
Her family is born, but she's not the only one. There are
Yes.
some very interesting families in the Philippines who are actually the lineage of this story.
So, in this context now, what we're seeing, I guess, let's start first with Israel and the Philippines. You know, as the ambassador here for 35 months.
So,
Yes,
3 years.
as you joke. For,
Yes, 30 months in Manila,
Yes.
5 months on EDSA.
So we've had, in this time period, you've spanned the two administrations, and we've had a change in policy from being an ally of the United States, and all of a sudden shifting to China and Russia. These changes in global power dynamics, how do you see it? And how do you see it from the Philippines?
I must say that the shifting that we are talking about, there's also some offsets. And generally speaking, I can see also the Philippines and the United States still very close friends. And,
Yes.
you do certain adjustments, of course. That's what we call differentiate between the voice and the noise.
Okay.
or how to discern between the noise and the voice. I mean, look, the global powers are global powers. They are going to play their games, and they are very crucial and very instrumental to world stability. And smaller nations are looking for diversification. So I mean, that's not unnatural or abnormal. So it's always, it's a process. No?
Right.
Let's not forget it. And we see today, I mean, the relationship between Philippines, China, and the U.S. And you see that the links are there. And the United States is very much here, by the way.
It is.
Supporting the Philippines army in its mission in Marawi. And so I truly don't see such a big change in that sense, in the strategic aspect. But of course, the interpretation can be different from,
Depending on where you sit.
depends who you talk to. But when you take a step back and ask
Yeah.
yourself, what really changed? So the sentiments, maybe, and the vocabulary, and some others, yes. But in general terms, I think you can see it's more diversification, and
Right.
I think it's also a healthy idea. You can make more friends. You don't have to. The most important thing is to make more friends, not more enemies.
Absolutely.
That's the whole story.
Well, you also have, Israel has had a long history of dealing with terrorism in its own way, right? In the Philippines now, we've just gone through a new evolution of the Al-Qaeda-linked groups allied with Jamaat Islamiyah now have shifted ISIS, and we've had this, it's been 6 weeks, right? In Marawi?
Yeah, that's more than 6 weeks, actually.
More than 6 weeks. So what do you make of this, and how do you see it affecting what's going on in the region?
We are facing for quite some time the rise of what we call radical Islam.
Yeah.
And radical Islam is a menace that can destroy many societies, basically. Because we have to remember that a democracy is founded on the idea of the coexistence between differences. Unity, the meaning of unity in democracy is coexistence between differences, which means my citizenship comes before anything else. And if you break that, you create total distrust among citizens of the same country. And if your loyalty is to something that is beyond the borders of your country and beyond the scope of your charter or your covenant with your fellow citizens, that can deal havoc and undermine the whole stability of a nation. Well, this is one thing to remember about the threat of terrorism. Terrorism is a weapon of mass destruction not because of the number of people it kills,
Yes.
but the number of minds it affects. So you can have a small action somewhere, reaction can be horrible. It's not a criminal issue. It's indeed a political tool, and it's easy to employ and deploy. So we can see that, I mean, we can see the impact also in the Middle East. We can see the impact on Israel.
Yes.
Look, the potential tourism to Israel is in tens of millions. Israel is the Holy Land. But we end up, I mean, with 2-3 millions, and we are sometimes happy. But the real story is people are afraid.
Yes.
Because, not really because what's happening on the ground, but rather the image of what's happening on the ground. Because terrorism is the image of fear.
Yes.
That's it. It's about fear. Planting fear is the result, and this is the objective of terrorism. So I can say that in many ways, what we see in the Philippines is a rise of a form of radical Islam that is globalized.
Yes.
And globalized in the sense that, now we have a common mission under a banner of pan-Islam or some sort of this generic idea of unifying the Muslim for another great glory of the past. Unfortunately, most of those radical groups are they are not trying to go back to the golden age of Islam. They are trying to take Islam to the dark ages of Europe.
Yes.
It's the opposite.
Yes.
So they are a very violent, very oppressive, very totalitarian system, and not, an enlightened system. And you can see the results. You can see the results in the Middle East, and you see the encroachment here in Asia. A very dangerous thing, because the banners are very fanatic, and the fact is, for 2 months almost, the army is trying to deal with it, and it's very difficult because you deal with fanatics.
Correct.
You don't deal with just, ordinary people where life is their objective. It's something bigger than life.
So from Israel's experience, how do you deal with the dangers of terrorism as a civilian population, as people?
We have to first of all acknowledge fundamentals when it comes to certain movements and how they evolve. And then you have to deal with those movements from the very beginning, not to attach to them all kind of symbolism, romanticism, and all other things that are not relevant to the story. And you really have to be always a few steps ahead of them. For that, you need a very strong intelligence and a very strong organization for counterterrorism. I think Israel learned by doing. It's not that we were there all the time. We suffered quite a bit. Until we paid a heavy price in a large number of casualties until we learned how to contain it. And you always have surprises.
Yeah.
This is not something that you say, "Oh, I learned how to how to deal with it, and tomorrow it's all fine." You will always have surprises, but you have to be quick to adapt, and you have to acknowledge that this is a threat beyond the scope of so-called, "Oh, that's just that's okay." There are some disgruntled or that's people, unhappy people.
Right, right.
Terrorism and radical Islam is not about humiliation and not about desperation. It's not about anything of that, because there are 4 billion people in the world with on $2 a day, much more desperate and much more humiliated,
Right.
and they are not committing those atrocities.
Right, right. Marawi, May 23, the fact that these groups are holding land and that Isnilon Hapilon, a Filipino, has really gained some stature has been recognized officially by the ISIS hierarchy. What does this mean for security in the region?
Again, it's across the borders by now. This is the big story. We can see, the actions of ISIS, and we can see the actions of Jamaah Islamiyah. You can see the African branch of Boko Haram.
Well, what we've seen is the transformation of a lot of the old Al-Qaeda networks and now shifted over to become far more radical.
Because they were brainwashed properly by social media to become a unified force and believing that they can really create a new kingdom of their own, in a sense that now it's time to fight for their own kingdom or restore the so-called the glory of the past. As I said, it's a very dubious past.
Yes.
And it shows, in the way of their action. And I think that most states that harbored before or had some sympathy or sentiments, and there were many states who had the sentiments and were helping preach and teach this radical form of Islam, they realized that this is what we call a Trojan horse. And it's going to be, affecting them as well.
Yes.
We see, the reaction. It's a very good reaction when states realize, hey, just a second, this is not what we meant. And the reaction is to contain, to share more information, to understand the nature of things. And the most important thing is to fight extremism, fight the form of theocracy ideas, and go for democracy ideas.
Is Israel working closely with the Philippines on this?
We are working with your defense establishment for quite some time. It's
Yes.
not something new. And,
Yes.
Recently we had some pictures in the newspapers of Israeli hardware coming to the Philippines. So
Correct.
And definitely we feel very much obliged, because we think, we are natural partners. We say friends in need are friends indeed, and we never forget Philippines' role, as I said, with Manuel Quezon. But also you have a very great position in the creation of Israel.
Yes.
Because Philippines was the only Asian country to vote in the UN for the
For
establishment
Article
of Israel.
181. Yes, yes, yes.
So, those two pillars are always pillars who created this very sentimental relationship between the two peoples. By the way, because of that, since 1969, Filipinos are exempt from visa entries to Israel.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that you should
Visa-free
know
entry
that,
to Israel.
Since 1969. That's, in recognition of your opening the gates of Philippines to Jewish people, we opened the gates of Israel to the Filipinos. So that's something to remember.
Fantastic.
So, yes, we have a close relationships. It's a growing one. It's across administrations.
Yes.
And I think that since now you are facing a new chapter, and a very dangerous chapter, I think that this cooperation and is a global issue. It's not just Israel, but
Yes.
there are other parties and other partners, and the United States will be a good partner, I guess. China is going to be a partner. Russia, everybody should be a partner. But this is the most dangerous movement in our time,
Yes.
is to restore, the old ideas where human freedom
Yes.
was not an issue. We are really trying to go back to, or they are trying to take us back to the dark ages of Europe.
Can I ask
in the
you?
form, in the mindset,
Yeah.
it's-
So, is it? I'm not sure whether it's because compared to the past, we have now instantaneous access to news, but it seems like the world is a harder, scarier, fiercer place than it used to be. I mean, do you see greater challenges ahead? I mean, you mentioned one, social media, for example. That's a big shift in the last year, right?
Let's be a bit more realistic and put some context in our fears. The first 50 years of the 20th century were the most violent chapters in human history by far. There was never in history a more violent chapter than the first 50 years of the 20th century, with 2 world wars,
2 world wars, correct?
with almost 100 million people killed.
Yes.
Today, we are in a world where the whole meaning of life and the relationship between government and people is so different.
Yeah.
We are no longer subjects, we are citizens. When you are subjects, you serve the ruler.
Yes.
And when you are a citizen, you are the sovereign and the ruler saves you. So we are in a different environment. Therefore, our relationship with loss of life is very different. But compared to 100 million people in 2 wars in a span of 30 years, and compare it to our times, yes, we have a serious issue that can destabilize our foundation of modernity.
Right.
But when it comes to the number of casualties, let's not exaggerate. Let's not go beyond imagination, because yes, today 30 people killed is a horrific affair by any account, and it should be.
Right.
But let's compare it to 70 million people killed in World War II in Europe, and compare it to other wars of the past. The wars of the past were far bigger. Look at the war in Vietnam, look at the war in Korea, Vietnam, and others. Look at the number of casualties there. It's horrendous.
No, that's correct.
So that's the perspective.
Right.
Having said that, we don't want to compare it to the past. We want to compare it to the future.
Right.
And in the future, we don't want any casualties of those kind of activities, especially not terrorism. But any casualty is meaningless nowadays when you can really solve the problems in a much more rational and beneficial way for both sides, because you have the solutions in so many layers and levels. It's not just about land. It can be much more than that.
One of the other things, aside from security, Israel is also has become a hub for technology. I mean, startup companies that are very robust. I guess, and this is the part where I think that there has been a change globally from the first 50 years to now, right? Technology, the impact on it, its ability to shift exponentially the way we do anything, the way we think.
Yeah.
Now LTFRB is dealing with Grab and Uber and a new company that's
Yeah.
coming up, right? So in terms of technology, its impact that you've seen.
Technology is the key to everything, and also, it holds also the dangers to many things, because the same technology that is used for the benefit of progress and development is the same technology that is used also to undermine development and progress. And we are talking about social media as a great,
Correct.
any digital media in that sense. It's a great example of, how many benefits you have at the same time. Somebody can come in, and to destroy is much easier than to build, and we know that.
Yes.
In any territory. So we have to be very much aware of the potential, but at the same time, the dangers, and we can see the dangers. Fake news now is a horrific affair. And since the news consumption, especially in what we call generational, gaps, or generation, we call the bracket, sorry.
Yes, yes. The millennial. Well, even the older generation get most of their news now from social media.
Yeah, but you can see it, I mean, even worse, I mean, when it goes down, I mean, to the
Understood.
younger generation. So they don't have access, as a matter of fact, to kind of what we call conventional or established news, so, or something that may be considered, I mean, as more reliable news sources. So
Right.
everybody is a news supplier in a sense.
Yes.
We have a lot of issues here. Israel is really one of the nations that decided that technology is going to be the economy of its economy.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, we have what we call an environment that is quite challenging. The geoclimatic and geopolitics, both of them are very challenging. So necessity is the mother of all inventions. Yes, and we did it in almost every sector of our life, starting from agriculture, food security, water security, defense, and now it's going to come into almost every possible arena of
Big
ICT.
data, some of the, yeah, exactly.
Everything is
Security
ICT.
and data, right?
So we are kind of proud that people call us the startup nation, and we have some very great success stories. Really, Waze is Israel, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. Of
So
course.
that's, I mean,
Yes,
Waze
that's
was,
right.
the disk on key, the USB is Israel.
Right.
Even the Celeron and the Pentium were designed in Israel. And I was talking about today, Mobileye, which is the future,
Yeah.
is an Israeli startup that became an industry. 5 months ago, Intel decided to buy it for
Wow.
$15 billion.
Wow.
So it's in 8, 9 years, all of a sudden you have a company kind of growing from nowhere into $15 billion value. So that's
Well, just like Waze, I mean,
Yes,
even
that's
that's a success story, right? So
even Viber, by the way, was designed by Israelis. So kind of not, but it's fascinating to see how much of that is really concentrating on
the
a small pot of
invention,
land.
mother, what is it? Creativity.
Necessity is the mother of all
Mother
inventions,
of
yeah.
invention. My last question to you is: we're coming up to the 1 year, the State of the Nation address of President Duterte. You've lived through the last 2.5, nearly 3 years here in the Philippines.
This
I
is
mean,
my third. Yeah, this is my third sauna.
it's
Third
your
or fourth?
third sauna. Wow.
Third sauna.
Okay, so the changes that you've seen here, and what do you see for us ahead?
Well, I tell you, in a manner of joke, many years ago I was spokesperson for the foreign ministry, and I used to head the foreign media section of that department, and I had a special greeting for them. Welcome to the country of never a dull moment. If there is a dull moment, we make sure to change it. I always lived up to that promise, by the way. In Israel, at that time, my foreign minister was Ariel Sharon, very legendary, very colorful.
Yeah.
And later on, after many years, I landed here in the Philippines with the slogan, "It's more fun in the Philippines."
Yeah.
I can tell you that now in the Philippines, it's never a dull moment.
We can say that as journalists as well, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Are you on Twitter or are you on Twitter?
No, I'm not on Twitter.
Oh, you're not on Twitter.
No, I'm
Okay.
on. I can kind of. Karina, my
Okay.
assistant, she's on Twitter. She's running the Twitter account for us. I mean, I'm not in the nitty-gritty of the business.
Fantastic. Well, if you have any questions for the Israeli ambassador, go ahead. You can tweet at Rappler.com and we'll get the answers back to you. I'm Maria Ressa. Thank you for joining us.